Today, we'll be looking at how to get excellence in your NCEA English exams. The majority of the externals are essay-based, and even the unfamiliar texts are essentially mini essays. So this will be the focus of this video. Essay writing is an incredibly important skill for both NCEA English and beyond. At first, it can feel quite challenging to structure an argument that is perceptive, interesting, and yet still able to be completed within the time frame of an exam. Don't worry though, we've got you. In today's video, we will be going over some of the most important essay writing skills, breaking down a question, general essay structure, planning an essay, and delivering excellence content. So, that begs the question, what does it mean in NCEA English to get excellence? Before we begin with our first skill, it's important to look at the NCEA assessment criteria. This is a great way to guide our study and tell us what will be expected from a good answer. For an excellence essay, we need to show perceptive understanding of specified aspects of studied written text, using supporting evidence. This can be broken down into 3 separate criteria. Firstly, we need to show perceptive understanding. This means that an excellence essay will not only present evidence from inside the text, but also go beyond and tell us what this means about the outside world and ourselves. Perception is all about reading between the lines and finding a way to teach the marker something new. This perception needs to be related to specified aspects of the text. By specified aspects, the marking criteria is simply referring to the different categories that are directly referred to in the exam questions, namely things like character, setting, theme, structure. Lastly, the question asks us to use supporting evidence in your essays. All of your answers need to be backed up by specific examples from the text. In a written text, this can come in the form of quotes, and for a film, you should probably use film techniques. So, for an excellence answer, we need to be perspective about an aspect like character, setting, or theme mentioned in the question, and using evidence in the form of quotes or film techniques. So, first up, let's look at breaking down your essay question. Now that we know what's expected of us, we can move on to our first step of successful essay writing, breaking down an essay question. Once you've picked a question, this should be the very first thing you do. The number one reason why most NCEA students miss the mark with their exams is because they don't interpret the question correctly. Taking the time to break down your question will allow you to start planning your answer and also ensure that you address every part of the question throughout your essay. For Level 1 students, it's a bit easier to break down an essay question, as NCEA presents them to you in 2 parts. For example, in this Level 1 question, you already know that there are 2 things you are going to have to do. 1. Describe an important character in the text, and 2. Explain how this character is or is not a role model for teenagers. Make sure that you are always answering both parts of the question throughout your essay by writing the question at the top of your exam booklet and checking your answer at the end. For Level 2, it's largely similar except it includes the word analyze and is a 1-part question. Analyze means breaking down a text into key aspects and techniques, explaining the intended effect by the author, and then relating it to the author's purpose. For Level 3 students, you're given statements rather than questions. It's a bit more difficult to break down these questions, but it's incredibly important that you do so. Breaking down a question is the first step to writing an essay that is well structured and convincing. At first, this question can seem a lot more abstract than the questions you see at Level 1 and Level 2. The best way to think about these questions is that at Level 3, you are convincing us of something, either agreeing with the statement or denying it. This question boils down to 2 main elements. 1. Descriptive, and 2. Explanatory. This structure is no different to Level 1. But you just need to pull these elements out on your own. For this question in front of us, we're trying to convince the marker that characters who criticize society teach us the most. In order for our conclusion to make sense, we need to link it to our text and provide some description. The descriptive element will require us to tell the marker about a character in the text who has criticized society, the first part of the question, whilst the explanatory element will be where we argue that they therefore teach us the most. This is the exact same structure as we see at level 1. Describe, then explain. But we have to do it ourselves. The way we would break this down is as follows. Describe how a character in the text criticized society, and then second, explain how they therefore teach us the most. For level 3 questions, make sure that you always link both parts of the question together. Don't tell us that a character criticized society, but then argue that they taught us the most for a different reason. The next thing to think about is essay structure. If you already know how to break down an NCEA question, you can start to think about how you might approach answering one. The perfect way to approach your answers is in the following format. 1. Start with an introduction. This is where you can introduce your text, the director or author, and tell the marker how you will address the question in each paragraph. 2. You should then have 3 to 4 body paragraphs. This is where you will address different elements of the question and form arguments to support your answers. We will discuss the specifics of what to include in each paragraph in the next section of our video. You should always finish your essays with a conclusion. This is how you can remind the marker how you address the question in each paragraph and drive home all of your arguments. The conclusion should not introduce any new ideas. Instead, it is a great way to remind the marker of all of your key points. Now that we understand the basics of essay structure, we can move on to the next important skill, planning out an answer. Once you have broken a question down, this is the next thing you should do in the exam room. As a student, it can often feel like a waste of time to plan when you're under time pressure. However, this is the best way to make sure your answer is well structured and comprehensively answer both parts of the essay question. You should look at your broken down question and think to yourself, how can I answer this from 3 different angles? Each of your paragraphs should take a slightly unique perspective on the question and build to form an overall argument. Using our questions from before, let's talk through an example. Describe an important character or individual in the text. Explain how the character or individual is or is not a role model for teenagers. If we're planning an essay, we would want to think about 3 distinct reasons a character is important. For example, we could say that Shrek is an important character because he 1. Teaches us about the importance of being yourself, 2. Reflects on his own flaws and improves, and 3. Learns to embrace the uniqueness of those around him. Since these are all distinct examples, we will be able to have 3 different paragraphs that all have something unique to contribute to our overall answer. It is much harder to write a good essay if we provide the same answer in every paragraph. If you do this, you run the risk of becoming repetitive, and it becomes much harder to add anything unique to your own arguments. When you're planning your essay, you should write your question at the top of the page and create headings labeled paragraph 1, 2, and 3. Under each heading, you should fill in the following information. 1. How will your essay address part 1 of the question? What will your argument be? 2. How will your essay address part 2 of the question? What will your argument be for this part? And 3. What evidence will you use? Write down your quotes or film techniques. A good rule of thumb is to have a good 2 to 3 quotes or 3+ film techniques. How will you go beyond the text and link this to your wider world or yourself? Remember, we need this part for the excellence. Let's go through an example of this. If we were planning out the first paragraph of an essay on Shrek, say, using our essay question from before, our plan might look something like this. 1. Describe an important character or individual in the text. Shrek is an important character in Shrek. He is important because he teaches us about the importance of being ourselves. Evidence for this? Ogres are like onions, they have layers. After a while, you learn to ignore the names people call you and just trust who you are. 2. Explain how your character or individual is a role model for teenagers. Young people are in the most turbulent period of their lives, and it can be easy to become insecure. Learning to embrace your own flaws and love who you are is incredibly important. Shrek is a great role model because he shows teenagers that you can love yourself even when you are flawed. Going beyond the text. The directors of Shrek, Vicky Jensen and Andrew Adamson, wanted the audience to learn to love themselves. It is an important message in the text which has a powerful impact on teenagers in particular. You can relate this to social media and how this encourages us to be more self-critical rather than self-loving. Even though it takes a bit of time to write out a plan like this, it's worth doing it for each paragraph. Doing this will keep you on track to answer the question comprehensively and in a way that is easy for the marker to follow. You'll also save lots of time in the writing phase of the exam because you've already thought about where you want to take your answer. Now that you've planned out your essay, you're ready to start writing. It is really important to follow a proper paragraph structure because this will set you up to deliver your ideas in the most straightforward way possible. There are many different structures, but the simplest one is sexy. Statement, explanation, example, comment. Before we send you away, here are some final tips for making sure you're writing a great NCEA essay. Write a clear statement at the beginning of your paragraph so that the marker knows how you will be addressing the question in this part of your essay. Watch our structure video for more on thesis statements. Link all of your evidence to the statement. Tell us, how does this evidence prove my point? What does it contribute to my argument? Don't take anything for granted. You should assume that your marker has never read the text you're talking about, even if it's likely that they have. You should give important context before each of your quotes so that they make sense in relation to your argument. It's important not to fall into the trap of giving a plot summary though, so think carefully about what context matters in the scheme of your answer. For example, if you're trying to argue that Shrek is an important character because he teaches us about self-love, then it probably isn't relevant to tell us that his best friend is a donkey. However, if you were writing an essay about friendship, it might be relevant to mention how different Shrek and Donkey are before you put in a quote. Think to yourself, what elements of the plot are relevant to explain my idea? For our essay plan, it might be relevant to say that Shrek is an ogre, doesn't have many friends, and is very isolated, because this all contributes to us expecting him not to love himself in the first place. Lastly, make sure to double check that you have answered both parts of the question when you get to the end of your essay. As we've already mentioned, this is the easiest mistake to make, and the reason a lot of students end up feeling disappointed with their NCEA English grades. Even if you have to add in a few sentences at the end of each paragraph before the exam clock runs out, that is much better than missing it out altogether. NCEA English exams can feel like some of the most daunting exams because you're given so little direction from the questions. But hopefully with these techniques, structures and tips, you will be able to better navigate answering an essay in the English exam. Best of luck for your exams, and we'll see you later.